Hello and welcome to the Unbound Human Podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this incredible story.
Well, hey, Kayla, it's really a pleasure to meet you and have you on our podcast today. And I just wanted to welcome to the show, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Kayla. I'm a right below knee amputee. I am an adaptive ski instructor now. I am a motivational speaker and just happy to be alive. I'm actually celebrating my third ampuversary today, which is pretty amazing because that means that I have made it 3 years past my expiration date. So I'm very excited about that.
Fantastic. I appreciate you sharing that with us. And like I said, sharing, some time this evening to kind of tell us your story and talk about you. And that's really interesting that you just said you're ski adapter instructors. I'd love to kind of dive into that because that seems pretty new, is it?
Fairly new. So I grew up skiing since I could stand, essentially. My dad would take us out almost every weekend to go skiing. And when I had my initial injury, I lost about 8 years of uh, skiing and mobility and things like that. And so I um, ended up missing out on a lot of those really great times on the slopes. And so afterwards, once I lost my leg, I decided that skiing was the first thing I actually was going to do after I lost my leg. So I was 14 weeks post-op. I had had my prosthetic leg for maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I got on the slopes and I had my first lesson to try and navigate learning how to ski with a prosthetic again. And it was one of the most empowering things that I have ever felt in my life. And so I spent the first 2 seasons after I losing my leg just relearning how to ski. And this last winter, I spent actually teaching people how to ski. Mostly it was kiddos, but it's all about getting just everybody on the slopes because it's something that everybody can do because there's enough adaptive equipment that anybody can do it.
Could you walk us through like that physical and kind of emotional experience of like getting back on the slopes? Because I mean, you said you grew up doing that as a kid, you did it with your dad, so that I'm sure that makes it very special too.
Yeah, we were a big ski family growing up. I remember we went to Steamboat as a family one year and spent like a super long weekend just skiing as a family. And so that was one of those activities that we all did. And so it was really a hard time for those 8 years that I just couldn't ski. And when I lost my leg, I had this moment of, wow, I get a second chance at life, and I want to just do the things that I love doing again. I just want to do the things that bring me joy. And so I spent the first couple months after I lost my leg trying to figure out if I could ski, who could teach me how to do it because I didn't know if it was going to be the same, if it was going to be different, if I could ski with both legs, if I had to ski on one ski. And so it was just an interesting time to try and navigate. Um, and that very first time that I found our local adaptive recreation center, which is Colorado Discoverability, um, they had adaptive ski lessons and they were sponsored. And so I was like, heck, you know what? $50 to go for a whole day lesson and ski gear is included in everything. And I was like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to just get back up there. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how I can ski again. And I spent the first probably 3 hours on the magic carpet just trying to stand on my skis. And it was so difficult, but I took my lunch break and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go down the slope now. Like I'm done on the magic carpet. I think I can do this by myself. And I spent the rest of the day just doing runs after run after run. And it was so freeing to know that with just a little bit of modification, I could get back on the slopes and do something that I've always enjoyed. And so it was a really powerful moment to realize that there was uh, a, a safe space for me to learn and grow and be able to do the things again. So,
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because it's really interesting when you look at like how you see the adaptive populations get into sports and it just like completely changes their lives. And I know that looking through your Instagram, you also run. And so how is that process? And, how's everything going on the running front and hiking?
oh my gosh, the running, I have never cried more in my life than when I finished running. So prior to my initial injury, I learned to love running just like 2 years before I got hurt. And so I was running half marathons and I was feeling good. And then I took that break, I lost my mobility, I lost everything. And so I was like, and I had probably close to a couple dozen doctors that just kept telling me, you're never going to run again. And so, same thing with as skiing as when I woke up from that surgery and I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to prove them wrong. And I can tell you those first 8 months after surgery, I tried my heart out to just walk. And that was a struggle. And it was probably 8 months post op, and I had signed up for a 5K because I was like, you know what? I'm going to just do it. Even if I have to walk to finish it, I'm going to do it. And I had so much adrenaline and I was so excited that I even had the possibility to run again. And so it probably took me an hour and a half. And typically the average person is running them in half hour, 45 minutes. And I finished and I cried and I was like, what is this? And I was like, it's tears of joy. I, so I just kept going and I ran a couple more 5Ks from then. And then about the year mark after my amputation, I ran a 10K on a prosthetic that I probably shouldn't have ran on because it didn't have a running blade, but I was determined to prove to anybody that I could just do it and prove to myself that it didn't matter. I was going to be able to run again. But I did it and I was so excited and I was like, you know what? I have to get a running blade because this is hard. This is really difficult. Um, and I didn't get a running blade until about a little over a year ago now. So I've only had it for a little over a year, but I've ran 3 half marathons in this last year, which is incredible. I didn't think I was going to do that again, but I was able to run. My very first one was here in Colorado, and it was a downhill race from Ouray to Ridgeway, and I signed up for it because it was such a beautiful, like, scenery, and I was like, "You know what? Even if I don't finish, I'm gonna enjoy the views," and I went in with this attitude of, you know, "I'm gonna be the only adaptive runner. I'm gonna be the only person with a running blade. I'm gonna be the only one that might struggle." And so I remember I got to like mile 5 and I ripped off my leg because there was just like this puddle of sweat in the bottom of my liner. And I sat down on the side of the trail and I ripped it off and I was trying to dry it off with socks to get back on the trail as fast as I could. And all these people are running by, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm just trying to dry my leg off. It's just too sweaty. And so I got done and I finished in under 3 hours, which I had during my training, I had not even come close to that time. So got done and I cried tears of joy again. And I was really excited about that because I didn't ever expect to be a runner. I never was a runner really. And getting back into it and doing it is brought so much joy. And I continue to be the only blade runner in the races that I do. But I'm hoping that the more races I do, the more outreach and people will see that like you can do it and you can be a part of these events and anybody can do these things. So it's been great.
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds like you've just been having a great time and crushing it.
Right. That's the key word is trying. So
That's fair. I mean, that's all we can do is try. And like I said, it just sounds like you're doing great things. And I really love that, we're talking about running and activity, especially running, because a lot of society hates running, which is just, it baffles me because I'm a little bit of a runner myself. I ran cross country in high school and stuff like that. And I run occasionally. It's kind of, I decreased my running due to school, but like what I really love about running is like the community. And so we're kind of curious, like how both running and maybe the community you found has kind of impacted your life thus far.
I have found such an incredible community. I started with the local running group, which they are leaps and bounds above my league. Um, I, but they're so welcoming. And part of the journey of this running again, I've met so many other adaptive runners and racers. I've met some of my new best friends because I reached out to them because they had made races in their area inclusive so they could have wheelchair athletes and things like that. And I was like, hey, I want to do that here. Let's try and do it here. And now I've met so many other blade runners. I've met so many other wheelchair athletes. I've met so many incredible people on this journey. And everybody's just running because it brings them joy. It brings them peace. And it's something that, again, most everybody can do. It doesn't feel like that from, going from when I was able-bodied. I had the perception that, you had to have two legs and you had to be able to just run and do things like everybody else. And, there's so much adaptive equipment and things that can help you do these races. And so it's been eye-opening and a wonderful experience to see how inclusive the running community is.
Yeah, and it's just so accessible, which is like incredible too. And so, and I love that we talk about that because I saw something on your Instagram today and I want to read it first and then I really want to kind of dive into it because I read the post as well. There was a picture and it said, movement is medicine and physical activity is a right, not a privilege. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about that and the organization that post was kind of inspired for.
Yeah, so that post was for the So Everybody Can Move Act. And what it is it's a movement that is going through the United States right now, state by state, where it is pushing for legislation to have insurance cover recreational devices. Because in this country, apparently, running and movement is a luxury, which, coming from an able body to being disabled, I didn't realize how much insurance would deny you access to things like prosthetic legs, let alone a running blade. And so it's a very powerful movement, and I'm very excited for it because it's aiming to include those things that can help people move their bodies because the more you move, the healthier you are, the more the Newton's law of, a body in motion stays in motion. Um, so it's been really impactful. I'm really excited for Colorado, especially because January of this next year is the first month that recreational prosthetics are going to be covered under insurance due to the legislation that got passed in 2023. So I'm really excited because I paid for my very first running blade out of pocket, and it was so expensive. And, I'm already paying thousands of dollars for just a walking leg, let alone a running blade that's not covered by insurance. Um, and so I'm really excited for that movement to hit all the states. I know it's only been a few states that have accepted legislation, but going to hopefully get the whole of the United States to get those recreational devices covered, recreational wheelchairs to be able to play sports and more of those, not just running blades, but, adaptive ski feet and things like that for people who need extra help. So it's great.
Yeah, I'm really glad you bring that up, right? Because I love that phrase, movement is medicine. It's kind of a philosophy that I definitely apply and live by, especially, going into physical therapy. But, realizing people don't understand, and I actually am getting educated on it. Pretty much every conversation is like the insurance doesn't help cover those recreational things because it's not deemed medically necessary, which is, it's really terrible and it's unfortunate. And are there other ways maybe people can get involved to really raise awareness about that, to maybe push this legislation a little bit faster, do you think?
Yeah, getting involved in the movement is super easy. I don't know the link off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can share it after this. But Nicole Van Krulen, and Kyle Stepp are the organizers for this movement. And I know they have connections in every state. And so each state has somebody that can help push this forward. And we just need people to get involved, to lobby, go talk to your Congress, write letters. I know they do lobbying days in each state. And so, just getting involved in those days and sharing your story and your voice, to let people know that, hey, if you help us get these devices covered so we can run and we can move our bodies, we're less likely to have to spend time in the hospital. We're going to be healthier. We're going to be happier because, movement helps your mental health and it helps your physical health and it helps your whole well-being. And so, um, just getting involved and sharing your story with them is the best way you can do it.
Yeah, and I love how you brought up the fact that it's not just about the physical health, it's the mental health too. Like the feel good endorphins to get released and make your body feel good about it. And then at the same time, someone that's struggling with an adaptation or a life change, these sports, community activities are more than just getting their body stronger, it's getting their mind stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I recognized right away was, um with my mental health is when I had to be sedentary for so many years, I struggled with my mental health. I was depressed. I was just unable to find the joy in life. Um, and even in this last month, struggling with a break in my leg, I've noticed that, having to sit still and try and find other ways to move my body, because if I keep still, then, you don't get those endorphins. You don't get that dopamine hit. You don't get the wellness of your mental health helped. And so it can be hard, and being able to move is really, you know, a positive impact for all of you. So
Would you mind elaborating and kind of telling people how before you could be active again, how you kind of got yourself out of that, and kind of maybe some tools you learned to help with your mental health through that period of what you were kind of inactive?
yeah, that is a really tough time. I struggled. So I broke my foot in 2017 at work, and I struggled for a couple years, a few years going through foot surgeries and trying to fix it because it just never healed. And during those first probably 3 years, I struggled with pain, but I was able to at least walk, a little bit. And so I, you know, didn't have a lot of need for really consistent coping mechanisms at that time. Um, But in 2020, when I had my second foot surgery, is when I went downhill really fast. And I ended up getting diagnosed with complex regional pain syndrome, which is also known as the suicide disease. And at that point, I had not struggled with suicidal thoughts ever in my life, really. And so going from just being like generally just sad to wanting to end my life was a really tough time. Um, I struggled with the pain and with the inability to do anything. And I was in a terrible situation at the time. And so I I didn't know what to do. I spent a lot of time in therapy. um I don't know how many hours and days I spent in therapy, but one of the best things that I got from therapy was practicing gratitude, which sounds ridiculous. And when you're going through the worst of everything, I can tell you the very first time my therapist told me to start writing down 3 things, just 3 things. And she's like, just write down 3 things you're thankful for. You don't have to do anything but that. And I was like, that's a load of baloney. And this is not going to help me. And I remember the first, I don't know, few weeks that I practiced it, I would write down, I'm thankful for a roof over my head. I'm thankful for my dog. I'm thankful for fresh water. And just the very basic things, because I couldn't see past the pain. I couldn't see past the depression. I couldn't see out of the light in the darkness. And I kept practicing it because I was like, you know what? I have nothing better to do with my time. May as well practice it. And I got better at it every single day. And so I started writing down on little tiny pieces of paper. I started writing down 3 things, and it got easier every day. And so eventually I was like, you know what? I'm thankful for the sunshine today. I'm thankful that I am able to breathe today, because you know what? Yesterday I couldn't. And I'm thankful for all these things that I didn't think I'd be thankful for. And I started filling this jar up. And as soon as I got to the point of needing to choose to amputate my leg, I had filled up this jar halfway, and I was like, you know what? If I don't make it out of this amputation and I don't wake up from it, I'm grateful, because I've had all of these things that have just accumulated into this jar of gratefulness. And I woke up from amputation and I kept filling my jar up. And every day got easier and easier and easier. And the journey has been hard. I can tell you that. There are days that you wake up and you're like, I am thankful I sat up today. I drank my glass of water and I was able to brush my teeth. But tomorrow is going to be a good day. And every day is going to be a good day. And so, being able to practice that and say, hey, I'm still here. I still have something to look forward to has been probably the most impactful part to get through those really dark times. And I know a lot of people are going to hear that gratitude. They're going to think the same thing as I did. And they're going to say, it's a bunch of baloney. But I can tell you from experience, it gets easier to practice and it helps. And it's so impactful for your mental health and getting out of those dark times.
Do you still practice that today?
I am not as consistent, but I do practice it. It is one of those things that I got really good at, and then I was like, I feel like an expert. And so I stopped filling my jar up for a while, but I got back into the habit because I I hit a little bit of that seasonal depression last year, and I was like, oh my gosh, I am feeling that darkness take over. And I opened that jar and I read one of those little squirts that was like, I am so like I remember I even wrote the little date on them, and I wrote that I was grateful to be alive because I surpassed my expiration date, and I was so thankful that day. And I wrote down something else, but I just remember reading that very first one of like, I am so thankful to be alive because I almost I wasn't here. And so it was one of those moments of like, okay, it's very humbling to remember that feeling because I still remember feeling that like almost not making it, and here I am. And so it's been one of those practices that, you got to remind yourself, this is why we're here. This is what we're doing, and that gratitude makes a huge huge impact.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's something that I've had to learn to do. And like when I went to therapy a year or two ago, that was like one of the things I had to do. And then another one was like grounding, which was a weird one. I still can't get the hang of it, but my brain just works 1,000 miles a minute, so it doesn't slow down.
Yeah, the grounding is helpful when your brain isn't spiraling. And, I do practice some yoga, and I've done a lot of grounding, but I can tell you the gratitude, if you're consistent with it, makes a much bigger
And if you don't mind, I'd love to kind of dive in a little bit because, we talked about gratitude, but you mentioned that you kind of went back and looked at it when you had to make the decision to get the amputation. And I think that's really something I would love to explore if you're okay with it, because a lot of people, and like I said, I'm learning a lot every day, don't understand that some people actually choose to get an amputation. I've had a few people on the podcast that have made that choice to get an amputation. And so would you mind like talking about that? Because I know you talk a little bit about it in your TED talk, but if you're willing to share, that'd be very great.
So when I got diagnosed with the complex regional pain syndrome, that was not something that was on my radar right away. I um there was a lot more treatments that I had to try right away, and I spent a lot of time going through a lot of failed treatments. Um, I had a spinal cord injection. My very first one actually um, was botched, and so I lost function to my entire leg for 6 to 8 weeks. I had I was unable to do anything. I ended up having so much medical trauma from that and other procedures that just kept failing and failing. And I remember it was June. So it had been 6 months of doing these spinal cord injections and like all this intensive procedures. And I got to June and I went, I don't think I'm going to make it to the end of this year. And that was the first time that like my body and my brain were on the same page of like, I think you might die. And I had this overwhelming sense of dread and fear, and the fear of death just looming about me. And I contacted a surgeon in Vail, and I met with him, and I asked him when I was there, I said, is amputation even an option for me? Because at this point I have tried dozens of procedures and medications, and I don't know what more I have left. And he's like, you don't have much left. You have a spinal cord stimulator, and if that doesn't work, that's it. And I said, well, if I amputate, is that going to help? And he's like, nope, not going to help. And I was like, okay, great. Thanks. Love that for me. And a month and a half later, I went in for my spinal cord stimulator surgery. And it was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. I woke up under anesthesia. I ended up having like the worst panic attack of my life. while I was on the table. And while you're doing that, you aren't supposed to move because they're putting these like 16 to 18-inch wires inside your spinal column. And if they move, then it can fail and it can cause more damage. And, I'm having this panic attack because I'm in so much pain and I woke up under anesthesia and I'm struggling. And I got out of that surgery and they tried, I don't know, so many different settings because they were like, here, we're going to try changing it and this and this and that. And it was probably the 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 canon event of it all that made me realize that if something didn't change, that I was truly going to die before the end of the year, because I got out of that surgery and I had a pain that I still can't describe to this day. It was the most unimaginable pain, and it caused me, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I was truly dying, and it was at that point I reached out to a few people that on the internet that had amputations because of their CRPS, and I said, did it work? Because I need to know, and I need to know where to go, because this has failed miserably, and this was my last attempt to try and get rid of the pain. I said, I can't live like this, and I won't be able to live like this, and I won't make it if I don't try something as a Hail Mary, because I'm like, I want to be here. I want to live. And I called a surgeon in Denver and I said, can I come for an appointment? Can you talk me through this? And maybe, just maybe we can solve this problem. Because every one of my doctors I had been bounced around from pain management to surgeon to surgeon to surgeon. And I got to the Stedman Clinic in Vail, and they're supposed to be, one of the best in the world. And I remember looking at the doctor at the time, and he goes, I have nothing more I can do for you. And when you hear that and you're in that amount of pain, it is a death sentence. And so I flew out to this surgeon in Denver, and I remember sitting in his office, and I had tears streaming down my face, and I asked, I was like, is this gonna help me? Because I'm not gonna make it. I can't live like this. And he looks me up and down, and he looked at my foot, which was dark purple and swollen and clearly non-functional at the time. And he goes, there's a chance it'll work. It's a 50% chance. He said he's done it on a few dozen people. So not very many. And he's like, I've done it successfully. He's like, here's my criteria. We got to, have this pain management team on board. We have to amputate at least this amount above the symptoms. We have to do all these things. And if we can follow all these things, you have a 50% chance that it'll work. And I was like, I'll take it. I will take any chance. I'll take a 1% chance at this point. And I remember making that decision, and I had so many friends and family members tell me that that was the worst decision I could have ever made. And so it was very isolating, and I remember feeling like, if this doesn't work, like, I'm just gonna drive down to Mexico, sit on a beach, and just expire in the sunset, because there's nothing more I can do. And thankfully, I woke up from that surgery and I had no pain, and I stopped, and I was like, I have a second chance at life. And I I I don't know how to describe the feeling of except overwhelming joy because, when you're that close to dying and you get that second chance, and it's like, I still feel that joy to this day. So it's a tough decision to make, and it is not an easy one, and a lot of people don't want to make that choice, and they wait until they have to make that choice. But um I also had to make that choice because I had to. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. So I can tell you it is okay. It is, something we can overcome afterward, but it is daunting choice to make.
I really appreciate you sharing all that, man. It can be sometimes hard, and especially talking kind of that dark path that you went down and just seemed like there's nothing else you could do, no decisions. And then, like you said, at the end of the day, you felt isolated, which that can be hard. So I'm kind of curious, like, was there one thing or was there multiple things that kind of got you through that? Or was it just a roll of the dice, like, I have to make this decision?
It was a like a shot in the dark chance. Um it was something that I sat with that surgeon. He was confident, he was calm, and he said, "I'm willing to try this. I'm willing to help you." And it was it was refreshing in the moment because after meeting with so many doctors that kept saying, "There's nothing more I can do. Here's another doctor to try." And I had gotten to the point where the previous doctor was like, "There's nothing more I can do, and there's no one I can send you to." And I was like, "Great, super. This is it." And so, having at least one person in your corner, having that surgeon that was like, "I'm willing to try this. I'm willing to help you because I want to help you." And so that was kind of the catalyst there because it was, when your friends and your family tell you that, that's a terrible decision. Why would you ever amputate your leg? And it's like, well, when you're dying, what choice do you have? You either try everything you can throw at it or you pass away. And like, so it's not an easy decision, and it's not like one particular thing that, you know, was able to like pinpoint and say, "Yep, this is why I chose it." But it was like I needed to live and I was willing to try anything. So,
And here you are 3 years later
yeah.
on the date.
Yeah, to the day even. So,
That's incredible. Well, I really appreciate you kind of sharing that story and telling us everything. And I'll definitely link your TED Talk because it was really great. I watched it today. And so there's more to you. There's parts of what you told today and parts that are in that TED Talks. And kind of moving away from everything, I really appreciate you sharing everything. What was it like being on a TED Talk stage? How was that?
oh my gosh, that was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life. Um, I I I had applied because I had one person tell me that sharing my story was impactful to them, and I was like, "You know what? If one person finds it impactful, I bet you somebody else will." And so not a huge public speaker, but I had just got my message out there, and I was like, "You know what? If they don't pick me, it's okay." And I got the message, and they're like, "Of the 13 people in this TED convention for the day, we picked you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like these are people from all over the United States and they have all these incredible stories too." And I remember the dress rehearsal, I was like, "This is great." I had, they teach you where to like tape up your microphone and how they're going to do the lights and all that. And we got to the actual day and my microphone came untaped from my face. The lights were way brighter, so I couldn't see anybody. And so I panicked. I blacked out. I don't remember doing the speech, but I remember giving my last line. And I was like, I'm done. I hope it was good. And I walked off stage and I cried because I was like, I don't remember any of it because I was so scared, but it was so worth it because I've had so many people reach out and say that thank you for sharing your story because it helped and made an impact on my life. So
Yeah, that's something I noticed about the adaptive community. You guys are just so loving and opening, and you're such a resource for each other, which is incredible to see. And sharing your stories does help a lot. It helps the able-bodied community too. So yeah, that's awesome that you got to do that. But I have to backtrack because you just got done talking about having to choose an amputation and basically a life and death decision, and then you're like, the TED Talk was the scariest thing that you could do. So how does that correlate? That's so different.
public speaking is a hard thing to do when you're trying to share, your most vulnerable story with the world. That's something that, that is probably one of the most terrifying things is when you're that vulnerable and you're sharing when you were the most vulnerable with everybody. And you're not just, in a therapy room on the couch holding a pillow, sharing it with your therapist in the secret of their office. You're sharing it with the world, with everybody to hear it. And, that's not something that everybody can do is be vulnerable. And I highly encourage it because it's very healing, but it is definitely terrifying to share that vulnerability with everybody.
Yeah, and it's so connecting and at the same time freeing, which is very interesting.
Yes, very freeing, very healing.
And so I'm kind of curious, what message, were you kind of during your TED Talk, what do you think is the message you're most passionate about sharing?
I think just not giving up is the big thing is you can survive anything because, you can rely on yourself. You can help yourself through these tough times and it's worth not giving up because oh my gosh, I can tell you the every year that I recapped, you know, what I've done since surpassing my expiration date has been, every year there's something amazing I've gotten to experience. I've gotten to skydive. I've got to meet incredible people. I've got to share my story on public stages. I've got to run again. I've gotten to meet these other incredible people who share the same story of just like, hey, times are tough, but you know what? You're tougher and you can get through it and you can't give up. You gotta keep going. Those dark times are dark, but you're much brighter than them.
I love it. Thank you for saying all that. Because I think people need to hear stuff like that every day, all day, you know? So, do you have any like big ambitions going forward now? You're just talking about skydiving, you're back running and hiking and skiing, and now you're an adaptive ski instructor. So, what's next?
Oh man, I am hopeful to try out for the sitting volleyball team for the Paralympics here in November. Because getting back and doing volleyball has been another really great thing that I've been able to do. Um, and so I'm looking forward to that. I am, man, you know what? I'm just kind of a yes man now. I any opportunity that comes my way, I just say yes to anymore. I Because of losing my leg, I had an opportunity to have a huge career change, which was I didn't think was going to be possible. And so I've been able to work all around Colorado helping other amputees go through their journey. Um, and being able to do these, adaptive events and teach people and um I really want to just keep inspiring people to keep moving their bodies and keep, skiing. That's a big one. I really just want to keep skiing and teaching people to ski because it's such an empowering thing. And, anywhere this life takes me, I'm pretty excited because I wasn't going to be here. And so anything that comes my way is going to be a new opportunity.
I'm really curious about what you're doing for work now. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, so I am the social impact manager for Evergreen Prosthetics and Orthotics. And so I work getting both the Colorado clinics, and I visit hospitals, and I help new amputees. I help let them know like it's gonna be okay. Um, because I went through it, and you're gonna make it through it because we're gonna do this as a team. Because you have someone fighting in your corner now. Um, and so it's really been a phenomenal place to be. I've been able to speak at a lot of events and share my story there through this company as well. Um, and so it's just been kind of a whirlwind of opportunities, and so it's been amazing.
Yeah, that's really incredible too, because like you said, you're there for that, person that had some type of amputation, and you're like, well, here's your new prosthetic. We're gonna hit you through this, and that it's doable. And at the same time, you're right there with your prosthetic. So I mean, that right there just that bridges that gap and instant connection. And I kind of want to get what your consensus is because I talked to a veteran that had a leg amputation. When it like military member veterans, I mean, they're kind of surrounded by people that like have been there and they're like in stages in front of them. And so I'm kind of curious, maybe like, what was your experience like that? And then maybe have you been able to change that with your new job?
You know, Coming from a place where like I didn't have a me when I went through this, I didn't know anybody. I didn't get to meet anybody with an amputation. I had found some Facebook groups, but like that's not the same thing. Um, and so even before I started with this job, I noticed there was a lack of support in Colorado, and I especially in my area, and there wasn't even a support group, and so I started a support group out here because I recognize that if I needed support, then there was going to be other people that are going to need support. Um, and I found that there was a need because you know the VA has their group that they can meet with, and they have all these resources. But those of us who lose limbs outside of that community, we don't really have that resource connection. Uh, And so trying to find, where do I get a prosthetic? How do I learn to walk again? What are just the basics of phantom pain and post-op pain and how can I talk to somebody and know what life's going to be like? Um and so it's been a really impactful group for not only myself but here in Colorado. And then being able to find more people because every time I go out into the world, the most people I find are, I walk into the grocery store and I'm like, hey, you haven't been to the support group, you know? And so it's been fun because I do not know anything. I know a little bit, but I don't know as much as, some people who have lived with amputations for 50, 60 plus years, and those are the kind of people we want in the group and we want to meet because they have the tips and tricks of like, how do you modify your bike so you can just go for a simple bike ride? Or how do you, throw pottery again when you're missing your arm? And it's amazing because we get to share all these experiences with each other. And, it's refreshing because, you can have a tough day and you can walk in and you can see somebody else who has had a similar, life struggle and, we can talk about it and we can say, hey, we're going to make it through it because we've got each other now. So it's been an amazing journey with that too.
Do you think because it sounds like, I mean, through conversations I've had, there's a lot of small communities and, social media is growing, but do you think there will ever be like a big kind of national group, you think, of someone that they could make something like that?
There is the Amputee Coalition does an event every year, an annual event, somewhere in the United States. This year it was in Atlanta, Georgia, but they typically do a conference, things like that. There are other small conferences and groups like that. But I think in the future there will be a lot more, because people are recognizing that these events, these conferences, these, you know, camps are empowering people, because there's a lot of us that live in these smaller communities. We don't get to meet anybody with an amputation or a disability that's similar to ours. And we go to these events and we find people we can connect with and share our stories and our struggles, and we can help each other. And I think in the future it'll get more pull. But right now there's not a ton out there, but there are some, which is really great.
Yeah, slowly growing. It sounds like you're kind of doing something on your end too.
Yeah, trying. In my little support group, we go bowling once a quarter-ish or something like that. We try to. But there's a lot of those things that, like, when there's events like that, I share. There's a conference in Denver every year that for the past 3 years I've gone to, which is really great because I've met a lot of really empowering people there. I actually spoke at it last year, which was phenomenal to be invited as a speaker. Um, and so it's, even though it's a smaller event, it's been, empowering for those of us who have shown up, because we get to, again, share our stories, meet people with similar struggles and experiences, and we get to help each other through this.
That's awesome. Kayla, I appreciate you coming on and telling your story and talking about yourself and about helping out in the community, and just love meeting you. And again, I can't thank you enough for sharing your evening with us. And going forward, I'm sure people can follow you on your Instagram and things like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
yeah, it was a great time. I appreciate it.
Yeah.